All right, gentlemen, how's it going? This is your main man, Scott McKay, coming at you again with another episode of the Mountaintop Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is actually near and dear to my heart. It's always kind of been on my radar screen, but I didn't have the right guest to talk about it with, as you've heard me say before. We're going to talk about challenging initial perceptions. And listen, I know a lot of you guys out there have suffered kind of a losing streak with women, and you're a little upset about it. So it causes you to see things through a lens of negativity, whether you realize it or not. And I'm not going to be calling anybody out here. I think you guys can all check yourselves. But I will say this, it happens to the best of us, and it can happen naturally if you're a human being over time when you're not getting what you want. With me today is an established author. He is a global human behavior expert, polymath speaker, and author. And check it out. He lives on board a ship. It's actually the largest yacht in the world, which he is part owner of, which I'm sure is very interesting. An interesting guy indeed. I'm just getting to know him. His name is Dr. John DeMartini. John, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your patience today.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a miscue in terms of time zones, which I think is probably explained perfectly well by the fact that you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. God only knows what time it is where you are when you're on board ship. So
you're about to change the time zone here at about an hour.
Yeah, well, see, there you go. You're like literally the goalposts are moving for you. They're liquid goalposts, but they're moving. So fair enough. I'm glad we're here. Your book, one of many you've written, many best-selling books, is The Values Factor. And that's the one that talks about this idea of challenging initial perceptions. You heard my intro talking to this particular audience of guys who want to get better with women. They're high-character guys. They want to do the right thing. But, man, it's so easy to start believing there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with women, or the timing isn't right, or there's something else that's creating some sort of excuse that's going to keep me from reaching my goal, even if I look in the mirror and think, I deserve it. Or perhaps maybe we're looking in the mirror and saying I don't deserve it. This is a huge topic. So what I want you to do is go ahead and just start riffing on what caused you to want to write the book and spend a lot of time thinking about this particular notion. And I noticed that we're all getting seasick watching your camera.
Yeah, we're moving here.
Again, fair enough, but it's humorous. So I figured I had to comment on it. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Every human being, regardless of their age or gender, in this case male, or culture, lives by a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most to least important to them. Whenever they are confronted by another individual, potential relationship, that individual has a unique set of values. If they perceive from past associations, current perceptions, current receptions of information, and past associations, that there's now going to be more advantage and disadvantage out of this relationship, that means she's either stunning or highly intelligent or highly ambitious, or has a lot of resources, or is very stable, or socially savvy, or inspired by something, you see a lot of value in it. If you are conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides, and blind and ignorant, you might say, of the things that are going to come, the fatal attraction side, you can become infatuated, admire, and by the law of contrast, minimize yourself to them and assume that they have something you don't. You're too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you. And instead of having reflective awareness, you deflect and think they have something you don't. Whenever you do, the superego is emerging, as Freud would say, and you internalize their values and fear the loss of them because you think that's a good catch. And now you minimize yourself and start questioning yourself, self-depreciate, think you're sabotaging by what you say if it doesn't get in a smiling response. And that's because you're assuming and giving them power over you by minimizing yourself to them. Nobody's worth putting on pedestals or pits. Nobody's worth living in the shadows of somebody. And as long as you value them more than yourself, you're going to have this response to guide you back to honoring yourself and finding somebody who's truly a match. Because if you're intimidated, infatuated with them, that's not the one. If you're present with them and you're being authentic with them and you're able to be both positive and negative to them. See, when you're infatuated with somebody, you fear to say the negative things for fear of loss. If you resent them, you're afraid to say the positive things for fear of letting them come close to you. But if you have a match, you're able to say the banter, the positive negatives without being able to worry about what they think. So if a guy is being confronted by somebody that's rejecting him and they're actually being set free from something they're minimizing themselves to and not honoring themselves about, and giving them feedback to guide them back to something that's authentic that they're going to respect. So it's not a bad thing. You don't have to self-depreciate. It just means that the feedback's letting you know that's not it. There's something greater coming. Be patient and quit enamoring with one aspect of somebody. Look at the whole picture and be reasonable. Don't just be emotional only. Don't let the impulses of the amygdala override the executive function and using reason to make sure you're selecting wisely for somebody that's actually going to match you.
A lot of the first part of what you talked about sounded like a really, really erudite way of saying, we think this chick is out of our league because she's hot. So, we put her on a pedestal and we start doubting ourselves and we think we have to walk on eggshells, and what I call the Disney prince phenomenon, where we think like if we're not always romantic and perfect and doing everything just amazingly all the time, then some other douchebag is going to come along and jet her off to the Maldives in a Gulf War and we have no chance. That's self-imposed. I try to tell guys all the time, there's no such thing as out of your league. Why don't you get to the point doing the self-work on your own where you feel like you're in that league and then you don't have to worry about this anymore.
You just nailed it.
Well, I've been at this probably as long as you have. So,
well, you nailed it. Nothing's missing in you. It's just in a form that you're not honoring and acknowledging. That's why if you compare yourself to other people, instead of compare your daily actions to what you value most, what's really highest priority and meaningful to you, you're going to self-depreciate. And the self-depreciation is a feedback to let you know you're trying to be second at being somebody else to live in the shadows of others instead of standing on the shoulders of giants and realizing what you see in them, you already have.
So a lot of this challenging of initial perceptions is challenging our own perceptions of our own self.
That's it. Because the truth is you're not missing anything, but you're not realizing it because you're comparing yourself to other people who you think have a better deal than you. And they don't.
It takes a lot of time and effort to do that.
And they don't have a better deal. They have a different deal.
Exactly. One of the things I talk about with guys I coach all the time, John, is we somehow tend to put aside the reality that, selfhood exists. We live inside ourselves. I don't know what it's like to be you. All I know is I'm intimately familiar with all my shortcomings, all my failures, everything I'm really, really ashamed of. And I look at someone who, by virtue of Western culture, wealth, for lack of a better way to put it, can hide everything that's going wrong under a veneer. But meanwhile, if you were able to see inside their head, they are dealing with a whole world of stuff on their own that you just can't see simply by looking at them. So our perception of them is, she's perfect. She's got nothing wrong. And me, I'm some kind of schlub and I have no chance. So I think that's very important. I think you're right on with that. And I think that's something these guys should always understand. The other thing that you talked about, and I don't want to let it be water under the bridge because I think it's important, is that when we start perceiving someone is somehow better than us, and in this case, a beautiful woman we have our eye on, we tend to get real transactional real quickly. In other words, connection, attraction, if she's out of my league, I can't depend on that. Therefore, I've got to somehow earn her. I've got to buy her something. I've got to do a favor for her. I've got to somehow support her on that pedestal of hers, or else she's going to kick me to the curb. And then what we do is we descend into that transactional state of relationships that, in my opinion, you're free to comment on this, I think is plaguing men and women's relationships big time, especially since COVID.
Anytime you minimize yourself to others, by the law of value projections, you will subordinate to them, you'll minimize yourself to them, you'll inject their values, you'll try to live in their values. Envy is ignorance, imitation is suicide. And anytime you try to live in their values, you have non-sustainable futility. There's no way it'll sustain. And when they perceive you playing that, they don't respect you. They want you to stand up to them with as much positives and negatives. They want you to banter with them. And if you can't do that, you can't hold them accountable that way yourself, and you're frightened about walking on eggshells, you don't have a caring relationship. You have a careful relationship. And careful relationships are non-sustainable. And it's not a reflection that there's something wrong with you or them. It's just letting you know it's not a match at this stage of your own self-reflection and awareness.
Well, because you haven't let it be a match. You haven't been authentic.
You haven't, you may be under the assumption that there's going to be benefits without drawbacks, but every relationship regresses to a mean of positives and negatives and things you like and dislike over time. So if you're not mature enough to see that and you're caught in the fantasy of infatuation, you'll minimize yourself, inject the values, try to live in their values, try to be somebody you're not. The inauthenticity they can sense intuitively. They don't feel that you're empowered. They need somebody. That's why many of the great women go off and handle with people that treat them not so nicely, because at least they stand up to them. So that's a feedback mechanism to go and find out, make a list of everything that you're admiring in them and find out where you have it in your own form. You don't have it in their form, you have it in your form, and honor what's not missing. At the level of the most authentic self, nothing's missing in you. You're not sitting there with lack, but you may not be aware of it. I've said for many years, from a theological perspective, at the level of the soul, the essence of our being, the authentic self, or whatever name you want to give it, nothing's missing. And that's where we have the fulfillment. But the second we go into our senses and compare ourselves by the law of contrast to other people, we'll exaggerate or minimize ourselves. We'll be too proud or too humble to admit what we see in others inside us. And then we'll have disowned parts and disempower ourselves. And people intuitively sense this, and they hesitate and are cautious about being in a relationship that's not integrated and whole.
Well, the elephant in the room here is when we're simply being a yes man and Mr. Nice Guy to a woman because we think she's hot and we want something from her, sexually probably, on the surface. Not only are we not standing up to her, but she has no idea who the hell we are and has no evidence that we even know who the hell we are.
Exactly.
All we're doing is mirroring her and hope she'll like us. And that backfires spectacularly because women's sexual attraction, their feminine nature, thrives on safety and security. And when we as men don't bring that and we bring the exact opposite, that whole house of cards falls apart. But a lot of guys don't see that. So they're going around going, oh, yeah, I agree with you on everything. What do you think about this? And then they get a first-person review from her, and she probably doesn't care how he feels about it. She's going to speak her truth regardless. And he goes, oh, yeah. I mean, there was a fateful moment very early in my practice where I was helping a guy with his online dating profile and meeting women. And there was a woman who he wanted to get to know. And back in the day, what I would do, it was very simplistic back then. It was a lot less complicated than it was now, was, if you wrote a good attention line and you wrote the right kind of email to a woman, chances were pretty good she'd respond to you. And so this was this particular gentleman's MO. He was falling into the trap you're talking about so eloquently. She goes, my absolute favorite thing in the world are those little vanilla cupcakes with the white icing with the coconut sprinkled on them. And these guys who have been following my work for a long time have heard me tell the story, but it's been probably 10 years since I mentioned it. So be it. And his email to her was, really? Those vanilla cupcakes with the white icing and the coconut sprinkled on them are my absolute favorite thing in the world too, with 5 exclamation points. And I said, what do you think she's going to think when she reads this? And he goes, well, she's going to think she's found the guy who's her match and that I want what she wants. And I said, I don't know if that's what she's going to feel. Because my knee-jerk reaction, and I'm a fellow dude, was completely different. And he's like, well, what did you think immediately? I said, no, they're not. No, they're not. You don't go around loving coconut sprinkled vanilla cupcakes like I do. It's a lie. It's not true. And I go, is it true? He goes, well, actually, no. I can't remember the last time I've ever had one of those cupcakes, but I would like one. I imagine they'd be pretty good. I go, see, we have some heavy lifting to do here. And it's exactly the heavy lifting you're talking about, John, right?
Well, anytime you see more, the ancient Greeks said, anytime you see more similarities and differences, you have an infatuation. Oh my God, we had the same number of eyes, same number of ribs, same number of fingers.
That's true. And you know what else is true? If you are not attracted to her at all, she could have gone to the same college you do, love the same rock band you do, order the same exact thing at In-N-Out Burger you do, and it won't matter at all. Well, until there's attraction.
When you're blind to the downsides, you do foolish things with infatuation. That's why, every woman that's ever dated me has had a list of things that they disliked over time. That's inevitable. So I recommend that you get that, put it on a big, long 400-page sheet, and laminate it with something so when they throw something on it, it doesn't get damaged, so you can use it again. And then and present that on the first date. I'm joking a bit here. Present all your flaws on the first date so you have nowhere else to go but up.
Well, that's one strategy. I don't know if I would lead with the negatives. I had a guy one time who was missing part of his left ring finger due to an industrial accident. And he said, well, that should be the first line of my profile, that I'm missing part of my left ring finger. If you can't handle that, then don't date me. And I'm like, I don't know if I would lead
that
with
that would be going too extreme. I'm partly joking though. But the Greeks also said if you see more differences than similarities, you have resentment. We go in two different directions. We can't see eye to eye. There's nothing in common. If you can embrace both the similarities and differences, you have love. You need both support and challenge, prey and predator, parasympathetic and sympathetic activity in order to feel autonomic regulation in that relationship, to have the EQ and IQ maximized. So it's to our advantage to have things we both like and dislike, and to blind ourselves to the things we dislike makes them the overdog and we're the underdog. But if we can see both sides and really love that, we have a potential relationship that can function, that's sustainable.
Oh, it's a sober sense of judgment of someone else's presence relative to your own. I mean, it's
exactly
an honoring of their selfhood. It's like a big namaste. It's an honoring of their selfhood as you hope and trust they will honor yourself. You use the term regulation, and that is a heck of a buzzword nowadays with respect to the human experience. I'm hearing the phrase emotional regulation 5 times a day, and I heard it for the first time ever like a month and a half ago. But I do think it is very descriptive of something that we as men need to work towards. Wouldn't you agree?
We have a subcortical area of the brain, the nuclei, the amygdala is a dominant one there. We have a cortical area of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, called systems one thinking, the systems two thinking, the cortex. The nuclei stands for nut, and the cortex stands for shell. So when we're a nut case, and we live in a nut house, and we have a lot of emotional nuttiness, that's our amygdala. And it always wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure, so it sets up fantasies and breeds nightmares because we're setting up unrealistic expectation. But when we have our medial prefrontal cortex come online, it uses GABA and glutamate transmitters to regulate and dampen the volatilities and vicissitudes that are going on in the amygdala. And what happens is we automatically start to have the EI ratio brought into balance and elevated. So we do have a regulating system, a governing system, the executive center. They call it the guardian angel of the animal passions. And when we are there, we're more empowered, we're more stable, we're more authentic, we're more expanded in our awareness of potential, and we're more attractive and magnetic to the opposite sex automatically.
Yeah, that ability to actually hold ethical values, I would argue, is more of what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom at large, above and beyond reason. I mean, I've seen my dogs, my 2 whippets, reason their way out of stuff before, but I don't know if I've ever seen them be ethical.
They have an incipient cortical area. They have a smaller cortex. It's incipient, it's there, but is not as developed as some humans. I don't want to say all humans. Some humans.
That's fair enough.
Some humans are better at barking.
It's a safe way to put it. But they should run faster than I do, which is probably important under certain, circumstances, especially from an evolutionary perspective.
It's been shown that maximum growth and development within our individual self and in our dynamics in relationship occurs at the border of support and challenge. There has to be both the two sides of life. If you get too much support, you become juvenilely dependent on somebody. If you get too much challenge, you become precociously independent. But if you put the two together, you feel love and you oscillate, or what I call the law of the one to many. Because when you're the underdog, you want that one, and they want to keep their options open to the many. When you're the overdog, you want to keep your options open, and they're going to want the one. But when you have a nice match, you oscillate in the one to many. When you're with the many, you're looking for the special one. When you got the one, you're wondering about the many. It's an oscillation mechanism, and it keeps things in check, and it keeps you accountable to constantly be learning and making sure you're current with what they value most. They're dedicated and committed to what they value most, not you. You're dedicated to what you're committed to and value most. When you learn to appreciate what they value and what you value, and you learn how to communicate what you value in terms of what they value, you have a chance of having a sustainability.
So at the animal level, that rhymes a lot with getting kills wanting. Once I become the one, I'll go, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll press my nose back against the glass and see what's out there now that I've got it. Whereas everybody who's never achieved it yet is looking for it.
You have to be able to have a balance of the one to many. That in Mortimer Adler's text, Syntopic in Volumes 2, he has a section called the Law of the One to Many. It's really worth reading. It's the same as the law of similars and differences, or the law of unity and diversity. It's the same basic law put in different words. But when you're dating the many, you're wondering about the one. When you got the one, your eyes are looking at the many, and you have to find a regulation of the executive center to keep those in check, to keep both partners not taking each other for granted, to keep it fresh.
Well, that's not necessarily an initial perception. That's a perception that's cultivated perhaps over a short amount of time. When we meet someone we're excited about and get into a relationship with, and then 2 years later, we wonder if we're really sick of their face by now or not. That wasn't an initial perception. That was something that was cultivated over time. So where's the balance there?
The balance was always there. Our intuition was whispering it, but we were ignoring it with our impulses of our amygdala. Our amygdala, just in order to capture prey, the amygdala has to accelerate with false positives, the positive energy to attract to that prey, to eat it. And it has to accelerate the adrenaline in order to avoid the predator. So whenever we're in our amygdala, we're getting a subjective distortion of who they are. We're not seeing who they are unless we have an executive system asking intuitive questions. And I always say that, if you're infatuated with some guy, your intuition is whispering, don't rush this, take your time, don't go to bed with it at least 5 minutes, be prepared to be skeptical. It's trying to whisper to you that, but your impulse is so strong and the fantasy it creates is so strong, you override that intuitive knowing. But listening to that and going back into reason and knowing both sides, you can have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process, or the wisdom of the ages without it. How fast are you willing to listen to your reason and ask questions to calm down some of the fantasy you might breed, which puts you in the underdog position?
Presumably, you're taking the position of a woman in that last analogy to explain to a guy perhaps why she would seem to want him but not go through with it. And I think we can all relate to that. And I think we can all even relate to it personally. I think we've thought that same process, unless we're just letting the small head think for the big head proverbially all the time. We can think, man, she's really hot, but boy, is she bad for us. Either she's married and her husband's going to come blow my head off with a 357 Magnum, or, she's showing signs of being extremely bipolar and just, the nut job you spoke of previously. And if I knew anything, I would stay away. But, you noticed how I was positioning that last thought of, 2 years into a relationship, maybe thinking this was a mistake, because I didn't want it to sound first person, because my wife and I have been happily together for over 20 years and I've never given it a second thought. So based on what you're telling me, my presumption is what we've done right is our amygdala and our cortex were in synchronicity this whole time.
Well, you have a set of values, and she's within a range where those values are being met consistently. If she was to say, when are you going to stop doing that darn podcast? That thing is irritating as heck to me. All you do is want to talk to people all day long. And she started saying a few things. Your commitment to your own values would surface. And then the realization, you then retaliate a bit to try to say, look, this is who I am. Love me, baby.
Well, it's funny you should bring up that example, because she and I found out about podcasting together, and we started out co-hosting one together, and she was just as geeked out over it as I was. So we were lined up.
Feel in sync with it. But if she was to try to do that, that would be a clash. So the idea that you have enough of those similarities to keep that relationship going is a blessing. Not everybody wisely selects or happens to select so beautifully initially. That's why I got to share a funny story. I was in practice 40-something years ago, and I had this 85-year-old woman walk in the door, and my little door had a little dingling on it, and just in case we weren't at the front desk. And she comes in, and she starts walking down the hallway back to the treatment room where I'm going to help her. And when I did, I love this lady. I just put my arm on her shoulder, and we walked back down there together. But she saw me talking to my assistant at the time, and I was trying to explain to her how to do something on it. And I was being a little bit abrupt, a little bit arrogant. And she said, relationships, they're such wonderful things. And I'm thinking in my mind, oh God, here we go. And she says, just wonderful. She says, it takes about 60 years to have a good relationship. I said, well, why do you say that, ma'am? She said, well, the first 10 years you want out. The second 10 years, he wants out. The third 10 years, you both want out. The fourth 10 years, you go out. The fifth 10 years, you say, oh, what the heck, the kids and all. And the 10 years, it starts to get good. And I said, I'm just laughing at this, trying to keep a chuckle on it. And she says, I said, why? Why is it so great then? She said, because by then, most people start in relationships in their 20s to 30. By then, you're almost 80s to 90s. And then you can't see them, hear them, smell them, taste them, feel them, or know who they are. You've lost your mind. And it starts to get great. Now, she was joking, and I'm partly joking. But the point is that we sometimes let our educated intelligence and our moral hypocrisies and all the ideals about how people are supposed to be by the comparison we get by people we put on pedestals and the fantasies of the glitz of the Hollywood and who knows what, or the De Beers diamond ring promotions or whatever it may be, and then compare people to these fantasies, which doesn't give them a chance to be loved.
And the important thing there, which may be the takeaway for this entire episode, is that is just as dangerous relationally as falling for someone with infatuation and eloping to Vegas. It's exactly as dangerous. It's just the opposite side of the coin.
You can't compete. My my wife, who passed away, was in Portofino on the ship. And this really handsome guy walks in this boutique where she's looking for shoes. And he turns to her and says, oh, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever laid eyes on. Oh, my God, just tell me you're not married. He gave a really, romantic Italian look thing. And he just sailed in on the Sultan of Brunei ship. So she knew that. And so she immediately texts me. She says, the most handsome man I've ever seen in my life just said I was the most beautiful woman he's ever said. And I said, well, I agree. He's got good taste. I can totally understand that. You are That's hot, right. Baby. And she said, well, what do I do? I'm flustered by it. And I said, go and rule this guy out. Because if you don't go rule him out, I'm going to be compared to a fantasy of what you imagined in your mind. Go get it out of your system. So I told her to go find him and rule him out. Find out he's just a slick speaker, or if he's really a good deal and he's a better deal than me, then I honor that. But go and rule it out. And she tried, but she didn't find him. And then I had to go and help her break down the fantasy, because otherwise I can't win. You can't win against a fantasy. You can win against.
Well, if it disappeared that quickly, I think she got the answer she needed anyway.
Yeah.
Ultimately. That's funny, because a lot of people, I think when they're putting someone on the pedestal and they're fearing the loss, What you said people do when they feel like their perception is they're not enough. I agree. That foments the fear of loss. It also, what it has done, even before that fear of loss is felt, is it's created a sense of at least potential ownership. In other words,
possessiveness.
This is going to be my woman for myself. And I think when we start getting possessive with other human beings, we forget that everybody's a rental. I had someone who came to me one time who said, well, I'm not going to ever, get into a relationship with any woman because they all leave you. And his perception was that women leave you. And I said, well, I got news for you, bud. We all leave. We all leave each other. We all leave. Someone's leaving someday. If it's like the end of the Notebook, well, God bless both of you. You left together, but someone's leaving. And it's funny because I had that exact conversation that you spoke of just now with my wife when we were dating. I said, if another guy, I said, you don't ever have to cheat on me. It's not something that ever has to happen. All you ever have to do is say, I found someone better, or I found someone who I want more than you, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And, if someone comes along and they take you and you would rather be with them than me,
you're set free.
I'll probably shake his hand and buy him a beer because he's probably is going to earn it.
You're going to audition for the best man at their wedding.
Something like that.
You're going to have a conversation with him and let him know some of the challenges he's about to have, and thank you.
Well, yeah, that may be true. My wife is adorable, though. I mean, my wife has presented fewer challenges than she probably had a right to. But I mean, the sentiment caught her off guard. And it's like, I don't want you to leave. I'm thrilled to spend my life with you. And I don't want anyone else. But I also don't control you. And so if there ever comes a time, I don't want you to feel like you have to sneak around. And she said, well, I think I can abide that too. I said, well, listen, I don't think I'm ever going to need anybody other than you too. I've already proven that because, both she and I were dating pretty successfully when we met each other. And within a week and a half, everybody else was gone. It was like, well, who would I like to spend time with tonight? Emily. Tomorrow night, still Emily. Wednesday night, you bet, Emily. So it got to the point where I just didn't want another woman. And so
I totally get that. And the woman I'm with right now, it's the same way.
Yeah, that's how it should be. And it should be not only she's hot and has a nice ass, but that you're compatible. You do a lot of the things the same way, think a lot of things the same way. It's not like my wife and I agree on everything, but we don't have a problem with what we disagree on. And usually it's like she likes Taylor Swift and I like AC/DC, typical guy-girl things, you know what I mean? Right now, as far as sports go, I actually care who wins the game when my team is playing. She just wants to throw a party and look cute, So, I mean, that's the boy-girl dichotomy when it comes to that stuff. But I think you're right on the money. Well, so far, this has been a wonderful conversation, John. Talking about initial perceptions, I think we've hit on a lot of the ones that plague men. What would be one that you think is unexpected that a lot of guys, maybe even smart, talented guys, let creep in that could be harming them that they don't even see coming? Give us an example.
Like I said, anytime you put someone in a pedestal and minimize yourself, you're blind to the downsides. Anytime put yourself on the pit, you're blind to the upsides of them, and you're blind to your downsides. Anytime you're blind, you're disempowering yourself, you're disowning parts, and you're, in a sense, adding to chaos and drama in the relationship. And the drama is designed to get you back to being you, where you have equanimity in yourself and equity between you and them, so you can have a sustainable, fair exchange, because everything is striving for authenticity, equanimity, and fair exchange to make things work. So everything that's going on, see whatever's happening as feedback on the way, not in the way. Don't judge them or you. Use it as feedback and realize it's guiding you to make sure that you're selecting wisely for something that's deeply loving.
It's just reminding you to be honest, isn't it?
Be honest with yourself and them. If you distort things, you deserve the chaos and the drama.
You deserve it. And you know what? The tagline around here is deserve what you want. And I've never met a guy who's mentally sane who wants chaos and drama. So there you go. Mic drop.
The love that's in the heart will eventually transcend the emotions that are in the amygdala. Listen to the amygdala, it will guide you to the heart.
His name is Dr. John DeMartini. He lives on board the world's largest yacht that he partially owns. So he's pretty successful with this stuff. He's pretty smart. He's done a lot of good things with his life. You can read more about him at drdemartini.com, or if you'd rather, let's just make it mountaintoppodcast.com/perceptions, PERCEPTIONS. And when you go to that site, you'll be able to learn about Dr. John DeMartini and what he's got going on. Also, I've put at the top of my Amazon influencer queue the book that he recommended for you guys before we clicked record on this particular show, which is The Values Factor. Grab yourself a copy. It's good stuff. Lots of people have read it. Dr. John DeMartini, happy sailing. Bon voyage. And thank you so much for coming and joining us today. It's been a wonderful show. And I will say as an aside, these guys love these really smart conversations that make you feel smarter after having them. And you're definitely one of those guests who brings that to the table. And I appreciate that immensely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opportunity to be on your show and for being patient today.
Yes, right on. And gentlemen, have you been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately? Because what I've got there is a brand new report for you called Flip the Switch. 5 things you can do right now to be better with women. It won't involve learning anything or memorizing anything. What more could you ask? Get on my newsletter. You'll get that for free when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com. Also, if you haven't checked out Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine, or the guys at the Keyport, or the guys at Hero Soap, you know the drill by now. Great stuff. I do not have sponsors of this podcast whose goods I don't believe in wholeheartedly. I use all of the best from all 3 of those sponsors, and you can too, and use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 with every purchase. All of that is there and more for you at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X and Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.